Welcome to the Harvest Series podcast, recorded here in Kaplankaya on the southwestern Aegean coast of Turkey during Harvest, an event gathering hundreds of curious minds. I could interview the most passionate and inspiring speakers, practitioners, and musicians. I hope you will enjoy this episode. What if the secret to a woman's strength laid partly in how she connects to the deepest, often hidden parts of her body? That's what we're going to explore in this episode of the Harvest Series podcast, recorded in the beautiful Kaplankaya. Our guest today is a celebrated Canadian Pilates and women's health expert, the founder of the Bell Method, an approach blending Pilates, pelvic health, and mindful movement to help women reclaim strength, confidence, and vitality. She has guided thousands through pre- and postnatal recovery, body alignment, and emotional resilience, helping women everywhere move with power and grace. Nikki Bergen, welcome to Harvest.
Thank you so much for having me. It's a dream.
You're welcome. Thank you so much for being here in this villa for the podcast. How do you feel?
Amazing. I just look out the window and I feel amazing. Look around us.
That's good. The jet lag is not too bad?
No, it's been easy to fall asleep in the beautiful villas, and yeah, I have nothing to complain about.
Wonderful. What's your mission here at Harvest?
My mission everywhere is to empower women and to help them really connect with the source of their power, to connect with their body, because so often we live disconnected. And really to help women feel more at home in their bodies. And there are so many transitions I have found through my work, and it's really the whole life cycle of women, from, preconception to, pregnancy, postpartum, perimenopause, menopause. And there are all these shifts where a lot of the time we can feel very disconnected and almost at odds with our body. And the idea is that through movement and through, a deep connection to these, as you mentioned, sometimes hidden parts of ourselves, we can reclaim our power.
Okay, so the secret, the secret word is the pelvic floor, right?
Yeah, I mean, it is so misunderstood and so often neglected. And it's something that still, it's changing, but there still exists a shame around this part of our body. And I'm hoping to change that.
So we can just tell to the men who are going to think like it's only something for the women, that maybe at the end of the interview,
yes,
we have something for them. So men, you can just skip to the end or listen also to what's happening to your wife, your mom, or your sister.
Yeah, everyone has a pelvic floor, men included.
Yes, exactly. Okay, but why do women struggle more with their pelvic floor? Because of the birth?
Often, yes, it's birth. Plus, we have 3 openings. Men have 2.
Okay.
So we are more, especially after giving birth. And a lot of people think if you have a cesarean birth, you don't have problems. You could still have other issues related to tension, often in the pelvic floor. And then prolapse, incontinence are big issues that, believe it or not, this is a depressing statistic, but 50% of women in their lifetime will develop what we call pelvic organ prolapse, which is when one of the low-lying organs, so we have the bladder, the uterus, the rectum, they start to descend down towards what they call, I did not make up this term, it's called the vaginal vault. So everything starts to descend down. It can really have a negative impact on your quality of life.
Sure. Okay, so let's first maybe describe what is a pelvic floor.
Okay, we'll back up.
Let's go to the basics.
Back up. So in class this morning, I explained it this way, and maybe if someone's listening, they can follow along. But if you're sitting on a hard surface, so if you're lying in bed or something, try to sit up. You want to ideally sit on a hard surface. And I did this in class. I had people sit on the floor and kind of spread their butt cheeks apart and kind of rock from left to right. And you feel there's a bone on the right side and a bone on the left side. Those are your sitting bones.
Okay.
Then I would say take your finger and go ahead and actually touch your pubic bone at the front, and go ahead and touch your tailbone, the coccyx, at the back. And now you have 4 bony landmarks.
Okay.
And everything between those 4 bones represents your pelvic floor.
Interesting.
And so it's helpful to visualize it like a clock.
Yeah.
So pubic bone is 12 o'clock.
Okay.
Tailbone is 6 o'clock. And then 3 and 9 o'clock are the bones you rock side to side on.
Okay. And all the muscles of the pelvic floor, is it many muscles connected together and between these four, this clock?
Yes, exactly. Like a web, like a hammock.
Okay. And what the shape? Is it the shape of a hammock or is it also above?
It's actually like a diaphragm. There's a thoracic diaphragm, which we all call the diaphragm, lives where our lungs are, like up top. And then there's a pelvic diaphragm, and they mirror each other. So it's like a web, like a horizontal web of muscles in your pelvic floor.
Okay. So what, maybe we're going to dive into all the different problems we can have.
Sure.
Should we do?
We're going to be depressed. No. There's hope, my friends. There's hope.
So should we do by age or by categories of, by category of problems? What's the most relevant?
Well, age is not as relevant because women who even are young and haven't had kids can have similar problems. So I think we have to go by the kinds of problems.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
What's the most common one?
I would say very common, as I mentioned, is prolapse. And it tends to affect women who have been pregnant and given birth vaginally. We also have leaking, incontinence. So the stats on that are at least, I would say, 1 in 4, 25% of women have leaking. And there's different kinds of incontinence. So we should probably clarify what that means as well.
Yeah.
So it's any kind of unwanted loss of bladder, of urine or feces, unfortunately, that you can have different kinds, but that's incontinence. And there's so much shame around it. But it's something that we can be proactive about. And unfortunately, it's shrouded in this, I'm embarrassed. And this is something we were chatting at lunch before we had this podcast, but I was sharing that, unfortunately, the number one reason that, and not just women, men too, go to old age homes when they're older is because they're incontinent and their family doesn't want to deal with it.
Yeah.
And so it's really something that I'm on a mission to, if you're 35 and you had a baby and you're leaking, now's the time to address it.
It would change the life of seniors.
Yeah, exactly.
If you didn't have this problem, you could probably stay at home longer. Also, so that's very important. Sure. It changes your end of life. Okay. Yeah, because it's quite a pain to change someone many times a day, and we understand that for everybody. Okay, so what are how can you change this? So how can you work on this, on the prolapse?
Yeah, so prolapse and incontinence are different things. Sometimes they come together, but oftentimes they're separate.
It doesn't have to come the same. Okay.
So incontinence, let's talk about leaking. Bladder leaking is the most common. Is you pee when you laugh, you jump, you run, and it's sort of a joke, right?
Okay.
Like, you're a mom now, suck it up. It's normal.
Okay.
And you can, and a lot of the times people think that it's because their pelvic floor is too loose or too weak and they need to do more Kegel exercises. But sometimes that can happen when the muscles are actually too tight. And so that can make it worse if you're like, I'm leaking and I'm just going to go do lots and lots of Kegels. Sometimes that's making a tight muscle tighter. Okay. So it's really recommended that you would understand what's your situation.
What are the symptoms of too tight and too loose?
So oftentimes an array of sign that maybe your pelvic floor is too tight could be pain with sex. Again, a lot of shame around that. We're often told, just relax, be on top, have some wine, use some lube. But really it could be chronic tension in your pelvic floor. Constipation, low back pain, having to pee very often, very frequently, more than every 2 to 3 hours. So these are some signs that you could be dealing with tension in the pelvic floor. And on the other side, laxity, where your muscles are too lax or loose or weak, is also associated with leaking, loss of sensation during sex, and also prolapse. So those are some of the differences.
Okay, so when you're not, when you're too loose, what are the things to do?
I mean, generally, I don't want anyone thinking, well, I'm just going to Kegel every day. When I'm driving in my car, I get to the stoplight and I'm going to Kegel. Like that, it should be more like a mindfulness exercise, not something you do multitasking. And I'm a big fan of seeing a pelvic health physiotherapist for actual feedback. So we were meant to understand what's going on in our body with actual, someone actually giving us feedback. A lot of us are very disconnected to what's going on down there, And so I'll tell you a little history lesson. Believe it or not, and this is so classic, but the Kegel was named after Dr. Arnold Kegel in 1940. and he was a doctor, and he was performing a gynecological exam, and he discovered, I'm using air quotes here, he discovered that, oh my goodness, this woman has muscles in here. So he called it after himself. He's like, oh, this is called a Kegel when I teach these women to engage these muscles that we didn't know existed. So the point is that, number one, a man named it after himself. Funny. And secondly, really is that it's meant to be taught with internal palpation. So you're supposed to really understand, like feel the difference. And they did a study and they found that something like 40 to 50% of women, when you ask them, okay, Rose, go do a Kegel, 40 to 50% of women actually do the opposite. They do what we call a Valsalva, and they push down.
Okay.
Which is obviously the opposite of what we want.
Okay, so that's why you would need a physio to just teach you the good move.
Yeah, and I mean, honestly, you can also use, there's devices out there. You can use your finger. You can try to figure it out on your own.
Yeah.
You can also use a device. There's a few of them out on the market, and it's really cool. It's like we call it a Fitbit for your vagina. You insert it, and there's an app. It links via Bluetooth, and you actually can see. It's like a little video game, and you're engaging, and you can see this little gemstone go up on the screen. You're like, oh, I'm doing it, and then you release. So it's a really useful tool that's backed by research to help you connect.
But I know in some countries, for example, in France, it's refunded by insurance after birth. You have some sessions with to take care of your pelvic floor.
It's great. I wish
not
that
everywhere.
No, not everywhere. And I've actually spoken to some students of mine who've given birth in France and experienced this, and it's certainly amazing and certainly better than what happens in most other countries. My own in Canada as well. But there is still a lack of integration. So a lot of the time it's framed as, let's go, fix your pelvic floor so you can go back to having sex. So it's like you can still be, you're good in that department, but it's not integrated in terms of like the how shall I say, movement through life. So for example, you need to learn how to breathe properly, to have the right muscle strength so that when you lift your baby, 5 years from now, you're not having issues with your pelvic floor, right? So it has to be, my complaint with this is that it's good, but it's not enough, because a lot of the time you're lying on the table as a patient and you're having someone do something to you.
Okay.
Right. And maybe you're doing a few exercises, but it's very isolated. You're lying on a table and it's not realistic. It doesn't really transfer into day-to-day life when you have to pick up your 3-year-old and your groceries and you know what I mean? So we need to learn how to manage the pelvic floor in exercise, but also in our daily life.
Okay. And is it enough if you have the beginning of a prolapse? Is exercise enough, or do you need surgery or...
Exercise, we know, especially, so prolapse is graded from 1 to 4. 4 is the most serious. If you have a grade 1 or a grade 2, absolutely, exercise, we know, can reduce the grade and almost potentially even eliminate it. If you have more severe prolapse, then you're more likely a candidate for surgery. But the interesting thing is that there are some women who have a grade 1 prolapse and they're very symptomatic. It really impacts their quality of life. They feel it. And then there's some women with a grade 3 that it doesn't really bother them.
Okay.
Right? So it depends on how aware you are of the sensation of something kind of falling out.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so we talked about it. What's your method for hypo or hypertonic pelvic floor?
Yes. I love that you asked that. So like I mentioned earlier, hypertonic means your muscles are too tight. Hypotonic is like they're too loose. I always say, imagine a trampoline. If you picture like that your kids jump on, think of the springs that attach the trampoline to the metal frame. You don't want the springs to be too tight. You're not going to get a good jump. You also don't want the springs to be too loose. You're not going to get a good jump. You need them to be the perfect amount of tight and loose, if you will. So that's what we're working on. And so the first thing I have students do is, first of all, learn to let go. Because a lot of us are stressed out. We live busy lives, and the pelvic floor is largely governed by our nervous system, our autonomic nervous system. So when we are stressed, we're kind of like a scared dog that tucks its tail constantly, kind of little scared little terrier dog. We do the same thing when we get a shitty email from our boss, when someone cuts us off in traffic, we're having financial relationship problems, you name it. We often will clench this vulnerable part, and it's a reflex.
Okay.
So we need
protection,
to exactly. Okay. It's like an armor. So we need to learn to let that go. That's the first thing I have my students learn.
Okay. So you teach them to let go, even if you're too loose.
And we're not pushing out. It's more that I want everybody to have good range of motion. And sometimes women that have been told they're leaking a lot, or they feel they're leaking, they've been told that they need to strengthen, they get into this habit of clenching all the time because they're afraid. Oh, I'm going to sneeze, I'm going to pee my pants. Oh, I feel like there's something falling down. So we get into this habit of almost like you clench your butt and you tuck it under as a protective thing. So you start to almost tuck your pelvis underneath you to try to stop from peeing your pants. And so even if you're hypotonic, sometimes you need to release even more because you've developed this compensation of clenching. So pretty much everybody needs to learn first how to down-regulate their nervous system, inhale, let go. And once they can do that, then we uptrain.
Okay. And so do you do different methods for when you're hypo and hypertonic?
If it's a private client, yes. But generally speaking, in my group classes, it's good for everybody. And that's mostly what I do is large group classes in person and online. And we learn to really let the breath be the mechanism of release and engagement. So it's all the breath. People are obsessed with the pelvic floor. The pelvic floor. The pelvic floor is not in charge. The diaphragm is in charge. It's your breath that runs the show.
Okay, so the diaphragm is in charge of the pelvic floor.
Yes.
Oh, can you tell me more about this?
Yeah.
Okay.
So your diaphragm we need a little anatomy drawing here, but basically I'm going to use my hands. So my hand this is the diaphragm. It sits right underneath your sternum, right? And then you've got your pelvic floor at the bottom, and they should really be moving together. So when you inhale, everything drops down. Your diaphragm drops so that you can pull air into your lungs. You're inhaling and you're expanding. And this is the analogy I give my students to visualize it when I don't have a visual cue. Imagine your whole core was like a barrel of wine. You're like, I've got you. Okay, so it's a big barrel of wine.
Okay,
and this is just physics. What happens when you put more wine inside of a barrel? That's really an analogy for what happens when you inhale. Do it with me. Take a big inhale, fill up, bring air into your body. And what happens when you take that big inhale and you allow your belly and your ribs to fill is that the bottom of your barrel swells down.
Swells down.
Yeah, what happens to a barrel when you put lots of wine in it? The bottom of the barrel, the whole barrel expands.
Okay, okay,
yeah?
Okay.
So
I
it's
would
the
see
same.
Overflowing.
Yeah.
I was like, how is this happening in the body?
Hopefully not. We don't want to waste that. But it's really this idea of really inhale, expand.
Okay.
So
yeah, sure.
Inhale, the bottom drops, your pelvic floor drops because your diaphragm is like a toilet plunger down on your pelvic floor. So when you inhale, the diaphragm will naturally plunge down, and that is what creates the drop of the pelvic floor. And then when you exhale, it will naturally recoil, lift back up, and it brings the pelvic floor with it.
Okay.
So if you're not, and I can usually tell, if you're breathing and you're stressed out and you're tucking your butt and you're breathing all the time into your shoulders, you have a tight pelvic floor, for sure.
Okay. Funny. Okay. And okay. So you have these exercises, but you add like a dancing. You do it in movement. So you have a method where you're not like doing just the exercise one by one, standing or sitting.
Yeah.
You're adding, because you've been a dancer.
Yes.
So you're adding movement to that.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, Kegels are boring. Not only that, just it's boring. But, just lying and doing the same exercise 30 times is not. You don't get good compliance from students. They're like, it doesn't last. We have to make it interesting. We have to make it feel like a workout, rather than just lying and squeezing your pelvic floor muscles. And not only that, but we've measured the muscle contraction, and believe it or not, certain positions like a squat, a lunge, a bridge where you're lying on your back and you lift your hips into the air. All of these exercises, when you bring your pelvic floor along, the muscles contract more. Something like 55% more, for example.
Okay, so that's a good...
So a lot more.
Yeah. Okay.
So you're going to get better results, and you'll strengthen the muscles of your whole body, not just the one part of your pelvic floor.
Okay. What are the results with your clients?
I mean, I have had really powerful results where people, I'll give you an example of this one story, which I think illustrates it beautifully. This woman, she was in her 60s, and she had 3 C-sections, and she had chronic back pain, which is very common. When you have right opposite where the scar is, there can be a lot of tension. We call them fascial adhesions. The scar is kind of like sticky. Things don't move properly. So she had chronic back pain. And she finally learned around releasing her pelvic floor, massaging the scar, and she was a grandmother, and she finally was free from back pain after doing this work.
Okay, incredible. Yeah. What happens with birth? And I guess I know it's not good for the pelvic floor. Does it always damage the pelvic floor, or when it's a natural birth and when it's a cesarean? What are the consequences?
I mean, there's no easy way to give birth. Let's face it. It comes out the abdominals or your pelvic floor, your vaginal birth canal. But so much depends on each birth, how you're supported, how long you push, what position you push in. And so there are many, many ways, and this is what I'm so passionate about teaching, of protecting your pelvic floor during birth, or specifically vaginal birth, where you don't have to have these problems. It's not inevitable. It really isn't. And we think, oh yeah, once you have a kid, it's done. There's so much we can do. And I think ideally it starts before, in pregnancy, because, and this gets into the whole conversation of, women having autonomy to birth and to push and to do it how they feel they want to do it, and not just be forced, for example, to lie on their back to push for the convenience of their care provider, because that's a whole other conversation. I don't know if you want to get into that.
No, you tell me.
Yeah. So we know, for example, that when you leave women alone and they birth and they get to choose and they're unmedicated, they've done studies, 85% of the time, that's about it, 80 to 85% of the time, they're going to choose hands and knees.
Okay.
Intuitively, they're like, I want to be, because it makes sense. Your pelvic floor is open. You have gravity to assist you. The baby moves down more easily. But yet, especially in North America, something like 90% of the births, women are told they have to be on their back. Yeah. And your pelvic outlet, so the opening, is 4 times more closed when you're lying on your back, because your sacrum, which is the tailbone area, it's smooshed against the bed. It can't move. So you've got people, essentially you push harder, longer, right? And you kind of have to also push uphill, if I were to draw a diagram. So you're pushing on your back with your legs in the stirrup for a long time, and say over 50 minutes, 50, is associated more with leaking and incontinence. And it's very preventable if women were given more evidence-based care, and also if doctors were trained better to catch babies with women, not always, because they're trained. Okay. And this is not midwives, again. This is more of an obstetrician thing. Most OBs are taught to catch babies with women lying on their back with their legs in stirrups, which is better for them. It's more convenient, but it's worse for the woman.
Yeah. I think it's also a bit taboo for the women themselves, because it's a bit more primal to give birth on your knees.
It could be in some cultures, maybe.
Yeah.
I think in some scenarios, though, especially if you're unmedicated, you're like, just get this baby out.
Yeah.
And then you got to get me too. So it's true, but there can be, it's more of a, I don't want to be a difficult patient. I don't want to be,
totally.
I don't want to be difficult. I'm just going to I'm not the authority here.
Yeah.
So it's this feeling, you're very vulnerable, and it's hard to advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
It is. But we need to.
Is the sport good for the pelvic floor?
Are sports good?
The sport, tennis or running, you have an impact. Is it bad in a way for the pelvic floor?
No, it's not bad. It's more a question of, are you having problems? It's really, are you leaking, right? Like, is something happening? It's if you are having symptoms, for example, if you're playing tennis and you're peeing your pants, that's your body telling you something. But doing those sports is great. Your pelvic floor is meant to be automatic. So it should automatically be able to handle the foot striking the pavement when you run. It should be reflexive, right? And if you're having these problems, that means you need to do rehab.
Okay, exactly. Yeah. And carrying heavy stuff?
Yeah, as long as you...
should be okay. Okay, as long as you don't have any symptoms, you can do whatever you want. Okay.
Well, it's more that, so especially in Canada and the United States now, it's become much more common that women want to get stronger. They want to build more muscle mass. They're lifting heavier, which is amazing, right? But sometimes we see this sort of look of, I'm lifting so heavy and I'm so hardcore, I just peed my pants. That's not good, right? So we want to learn how to what we call manage intra-abdominal pressure. So basically, if you're, lifting stuff at the gym and anytime you're peeing your pants, I would recommend that you stop and that you learn different strategies on how to breathe so that that doesn't happen.
What are the biggest misconceptions about the pelvic floor?
That, number one, it's just where you stop the flow of urine. A lot of times people think that a Kegel is just, I'm going to stop peeing. But that's only the front part. There's so much more towards the back. It's the idea that Kegels is the answer, or that Kegels is something we need to do to prepare for birth. We actually have to learn more to let go and release this area, not constantly be clenching. And it's also this idea that, we can, once you have a baby, you're loose. In fact, sometimes women become more tight in that area afterwards.
Okay. And what do you think about electrostimulation?
It can be great. I'd say it's a good adjunctive therapy. So meaning that do it in addition to the work on your own. There is no quick fix in life, this. So you going, and there's a lot of these very expensive devices where it's like, go sit on this chair, the Emsella chair, go do this stimulation, All of it can absolutely help, but you also have to participate in your own rehab. You also have to strengthen your glutes, for example, which is your butt, right? We have to.
Why do you have to straighten your
the
butt?
Glutes?
Yeah.
It's honestly, if I give anyone any advice here, if you're dealing with pelvic floor problems, whether it's leaking, prolapse, you need to develop, and thankfully people want a bigger butt now. Like
exactly.
It's trendy.
Anyway, it doesn't hurt, but
but we need
but how
to.
is it related? Yeah.
Yeah. So the analogy I give is, imagine your pelvic floor is working overtime. So if your glutes are weak, or you're tucking your butt all the time, right? You're afraid you're going to pee your pants and you're like, oh shit, I'm going to you clench. Then your glutes atrophy. The muscles actually sadly, they become weaker because you're not using them. You're using your glutes as a stabilizer.
Okay.
Think about, did you watch the Olympics? Did you watch the sprinters? They're beautiful.
Yes, yeah.
Do you see how beautiful their butts are?
Yeah, completely.
A sprinter's butt is perfect. It's the perfect example of a human glute, because that glute is power. It's what they use to go fast. Your glutes are meant to push you forwards. They are not meant to tuck under.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah, because it's almost square.
Yeah, it's not. When you tuck your bum, your glutes become flat.
Yeah.
So, why do we tuck our butt often as women? Because we're sucking in our stomach and we are afraid we're going to pee our pants. Right? We're sucking and we're tucking. So we need to fix that pattern, which is a lot of what I spend my time doing in class, and learn to let go of the muscles so we can actually build our butt back. And when we have a strong glutes, then our pelvic floor feels like it's supported. If your pelvic floor is tight and stressed out, it's kind of like the spouse at home that has no support.
Tell me more now about the men, because we, for those
okay, guys, listen up.
Been patient so far.
So a lot of men, I tend to see myself after they've had a prostate problem, because a lot of men deal with incontinence after they've had all of their prostate removed. And they're going, oh my God, this is never an issue. And they don't go through the same stress on their pelvic floor, obviously, as women who bear children do. But that's one thing with like that. But then also, a lot of men are dealing with tension in their pelvic floor too. I see it a lot in cyclists. I see it a lot in men who lift a lot of heavy weights and get hemorrhoids. And tension in the pelvic floor is associated with essentially ejaculating too soon when they're in sex. They don't last as long. And so that's a problem that I think a lot of men might be concerned around.
And they have no clue it can be related.
100%.
It's very difficult to make the link between the two. Okay.
Yeah.
So what's the solution for this?
There's pelvic physiotherapy for men too.
Okay.
Yeah. And they'll do it on the perineum. It could be rectal work, and it doesn't sound fun, I know, but even just the awareness, even without the internal exam, the learning to release as well as engage is important just for men. And so the cue I give men, they might be like, well, what's a Kegel? I don't understand the lifting thing. But if you imagine you walk into a cold lake and that sensation of everything lifting up, that's the male Kegel.
Okay. And then you because I remember what the midwife told me after birth, and then you need to release after, before doing the Kegel, you need to release, no? And after.
Yeah, you have to fully learn how to do like any muscle, you need good range of motion for function. It's the same thing with men. So men, if you're having this problem, don't ignore the possibility that it could be related to your pelvic floor, especially if you bike a lot.
How, Nikki, what was your journey to be to know everything about the pelvic floor?
I think we're all just still discovering it. I don't know everything, but I do have a deep passion for it. And I don't imagine that's ever going to stop. I see it as there's so much around advocacy, like women's health advocacy. So the pelvic floor is an example where I think women have been sort of cast aside and neglected. It's sort of like you have kids, you have this injury, well, at least you have a healthy kid, stop complaining. So I feel like there's this fuel to the fire that fuels me for women to not suffer in silence and to really feel like they have better care. And it just in my mind, it starts a lot to do with when they start to bear children, but it progresses into, all stages of life. I think in general, women's health has been largely under-researched, underfunded, and it needs to change.
Well, and but you didn't study medicine at the beginning. So how did you come to so much knowledge? Because it's really related to to medicine now. Well, yeah.
Yeah. I started funnily enough, in university, I did not study kinesiology or anything like that. I studied business, but I'd always danced. So basically I danced my whole life. Then I studied business because I never thought of it as being a professional career for me. And after I graduated university, I took a year and I went back to dance. I was always pulled back to movement. I loved movement. So I finished my proper degree, fancy school, business degree, then back to dancing. And then, and then I went and did another degree in journalism. And then, back to dancing. Like throughout my 20s, I kept being pulled back. And I injured my knee when I was performing, dancing. And I discovered Pilates was a very powerful rehabilitation tool. I was only 24 and fell in love with it, did my certification. It was all new because I had the business, but I didn't have any of this anatomy or anything like that. And then when I graduated, I knew I didn't want to work at a studio. So this is where the business came in. I was like, no, I'm going to, do something different. So I bought a big reformer. This was like almost 20 years ago. And I cold called, just looked up the numbers, and I called a lot of sport medicine clinics. It only took me one day to find a clinic. And I said, hey, do you offer Pilates? And they said, no. I'm like, do you want Pilates? Do you have space? I can set up my reformer. We'll just split everything. And they said, yes. So in hindsight, it was excellent because I was 20 at the time, 26 years old. And I'm in this clinic. And I really, frankly, had no business being there. I had no idea what I was doing. I was fresh out of school, and I'm seeing people like a firefighter with a herniated disc, and a 75-year-old with osteoporosis, and a gymnast with a metal rod in her back from the surgery. And so basically, I had to learn very quickly, but I was surrounded by people who knew so much more than me. So I would study before each session. And, and I would learn, how can I deal with this issue? What do I do with this scenario? So I learned very quickly. And then eventually a lot of these people had insurance, and their insurance ran out. And they said, I want a group class. It's cheaper. I can't do privates anymore. So I said, okay, let's do a group class. So at the end of the day, the clinic doors would close. I would move the treatment tables. We had this little carpeted area, and I would have maybe 10 people in my class. And I used my dance background to make it not boring, because physio can be boring. And I created a method of making it a workout to music with the dance background, but also the physio and the Pilates. And then the pelvic floor stuff just came organically because pregnant women started showing up. And I was like, oh no, you need your own class. Like, let's do that. So it was very organic. And then I started training other teachers, and it just grew from there.
Wow, wonderful. But thank you for your advice, your explanation, and your patience with my question.
No, it's good.
And it was very instructive. And yes, I think it's amazing to break the taboo and to make the health and the confidence of people improve. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I love talking about it.
Yeah, for our next meal together, Nikki.
Yeah, exactly.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thanks for watching this episode of the Harvest Series podcast recorded in Kaplankaya. If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe to have some more.